The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of Willow Creek, a small town where nothing much ever happened. The air carried the faint scent of pine trees from the nearby forest, mingled with the crispness of autumn, leaves crunching underfoot. Rookie police officer Mia Torres sat in her patrol car at the edge of Main Street, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. She had been on the force for only 6 months, and while she loved her job, it wasn't exactly what she'd imagined when she dreamed of becoming a cop as a child. Her days were filled with parking violations, noise complaints, and the occasional lost dog report. Today seemed no different. Mia glanced at the dashboard clock. It was almost 4:30 p.m., and the day was winding down. She decided to take one last loop around town before heading back to the station. As she drove slowly through the residential area, something caught her eye. A blue sedan with a broken taillight weaving slightly along the road ahead. At first glance, it didn't seem like reckless driving, but Mia knew better than to ignore even the smallest infractions. After all, her training sergeant had drilled into her head that paying attention to details could prevent bigger problems later. She flicked on her patrol car's flashing lights and pulled up behind the sedan. The driver slowed down and parked, neatly by the curb without hesitation. Mia grabbed her clipboard and stepped out of the car, adjusting her utility belt as she approached the vehicle. The man behind the wheel looked older, probably in his late 60s or early 70s, with salt and pepper hair and deep lines etched into his weathered face. He wore a simple flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans, and his hands rested calmly on the steering wheel. There was a quiet dignity about him, the kind that comes from years of hard-earned experience. "Good afternoon, sir," Mia said politely, leaning down to speak through the open window. "I pulled you over because your right taillight is out." The man turned his head slightly and gave her a nod. His eyes were sharp and clear, belying his age. "Afternoon, officer," he replied in a gravelly voice tinged with warmth. "I appreciate you letting me know. Haven't noticed it myself." "No problem," Mia said, offering a friendly smile. "Do you mind showing me your license and registration?" He nodded again and reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a worn leather wallet. While he fumbled with the papers, Mia couldn't help but notice the interior of the car. On the passenger seat lay a stack of documents tied together with string, along with several framed photographs and medals. One medal gleamed particularly brightly despite its age, a Purple Heart. Her curiosity piqued. Mia leaned closer. "Were you in the military, sir?" she asked, gesturing toward the items on the seat. The man paused, his fingers brushing against the edge of the medal. For a moment he looked unsure whether to answer, but then he sighed softly and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Marine Corps. Retired. Now." "That's impressive," Mia said genuinely. "Thank you for your service." A flicker of emotion passed over his face. Pride, maybe, or perhaps sadness. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Just doing my duty," he murmured. Mia jotted down his information as he handed over his license and registration. His name was Harold Grayson, though he introduced himself simply as Hank. Something about him intrigued her. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, with a quiet strength that suggested he'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. Or maybe it was the sense that there was more to this traffic stop than met the eye. As she reviewed his documents, Mia noticed the stack of papers again. They looked old, yellowed at the edges, and carefully preserved. "What's all this, if you don't mind me asking?" she said, nodding toward the pile. Hank hesitated, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Just some old records," he said vaguely. "Nothing important." But Mia wasn't convinced. Years of listening to her gut told her there was more to the story. Still, she didn't press further, at least not yet. Instead, she handed back his license and registration with a reassuring smile. "Well, Mr. Grayson, I'll let you off with a warning this time, but make sure to get that tail light fixed soon, okay?" "Will do," Hank replied, giving her a grateful nod. "Thanks, officer." As she walked back to her patrol car, Mia glanced over her shoulder. Hank hadn't moved yet. He was staring straight ahead, lost in thought. Something about him tugged at her heartstrings. Maybe it was the loneliness in his eyes, or the way he clutched those papers like they were precious cargo. Whatever it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from ordinary. Back in her car, Mia watched Hank pull away in his sedan. She tapped her pen against the dashboard, debating whether to follow up on her instincts. Traffic stops usually ended here. License checked, warning issued, case closed. But something told her this wasn't going to be one of those times. Little did she know, her decision to trust her gut would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Mia's patrol car idled quietly as she watched Hank's sedan disappear around the corner. The encounter had left her with more questions than answers. Who was this man, really? What were those old documents he was so protective of? And why? Did he seem so uneasy when she asked about them? Her instincts told her there was more to the story, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. For a moment she considered letting it go. After all, it was just a routine traffic stop. But something inside her wouldn't let it rest. Curiosity got the better of her. She decided to do a little digging. Back at the station, Mia ran Hank Grayson's name through the system. It didn't take long for the results to pop up. What she found surprised her. Hank wasn't just any retired Marine. He had served during a pivotal time in history, earning multiple commendations for bravery under fire. His service record was impressive, filled with mentions of valor and dedication. But what caught her attention most was a note buried deep in his file, a reference to classified documents related to a covert operation decades ago. The details were sparse, but it was enough to make her wonder if those papers in his car had something to do with it. The next morning, Mia decided to pay Hank a visit. She tracked down his address from public records and drove to a modest house on the outskirts of town. The yard was neat, with flower beds lining the driveway and an American flag fluttering gently in the breeze. As she knocked on the door, she felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Would he talk to her, or would he shut her out completely? After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing Hank standing there in a faded sweatshirt and slippers. He looked surprised to see her, but quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Officer Torres," he said, his voice steady. "What brings you here?" "Good morning, Mr. Grayson," Mia replied, trying to sound casual. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I just wanted to check in after yesterday. Everything okay with your car?" Hank nodded slowly. "Yeah, I got the taillight fixed this morning. Thanks again for the warning." "That's good to hear," Mia said, pausing briefly before continuing. "Listen, I noticed some medals and documents in your car yesterday. I couldn't help but be curious. You've clearly done incredible things in your life. If you don't mind sharing, I'd love to hear more about your time in the Marines." For a moment, Hank didn't respond. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh, he stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. "You might as well come in," he said gruffly. "I can tell you're not going to let this go." Inside, the house was warm and inviting, with photos covering nearly every surface. Most of them showed a younger Hank in uniform, standing proudly beside fellow soldiers or posing with his family. There were also pictures of a woman who appeared frequently, a kind-looking woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile. Mia assumed it was his wife, though she didn't say anything. Hank motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table while he poured 2 cups of coffee. When he joined her, he placed 1 cup in front of her and sat down heavily across from her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Hank broke the silence. "I guess you deserve to know," he began, his voice low and measured. "Those documents, they're part of my past, something I've been carrying around for years." Mia leaned forward, slightly intrigued. "What kind of documents?" Hank hesitated, as if weighing whether to trust her. Then, with a resigned sigh, he explained. Decades earlier, during his final tour of duty, Hank had been entrusted with a set of classified files by a high-ranking officer. The files contained sensitive information about a top-secret mission, one that had never officially existed. At the time, Hank hadn't thought much of it. Orders were orders, and he followed them without question. But when he returned home after retiring, the files remained in his possession. Over the years, their significance faded, and they became little more than relics of his service. Recently, however, Hank received word that a local museum was collecting artifacts and memorabilia from veterans to preserve their stories for future generations. He decided to donate the files, believing they could serve as a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who served. That's why he had been driving back from visiting his late wife's grave to deliver the documents to the museum. But here's the thing, Hank added, his tone growing serious. Ever since I left home, I've had this feeling, like someone's watching me, following me. I thought I was imagining it at first, but now I'm sure of it. Mia frowned, her heart sinking. Do you think someone knows about the documents? Hank shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it's just paranoia. Either way, I don't like it. Mia's mind raced. Could someone really be after these old files? They were decades old. Surely their value was historical rather than practical. Still, the idea that Hank might be in danger gnawed at her. She realized she needed to act fast. Mr. Grayson, she said firmly, I want to help you. Let's get those documents somewhere safe until we figure out what's going on. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. Hank looked at her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment it seemed like he might refuse, but then he nodded. All right, he said quietly. But promise me one thing, you'll keep this between us. No one else needs to know. I promise. Mia replied without hesitation. They agreed to meet later that day so Mia could escort Hank to the museum. As she left his house, her thoughts swirled with uncertainty. Was she overreacting? Or was there truly something sinister lurking beneath the surface? One thing was certain. Whatever happened next, Mia knew she couldn't walk away, not when Hank's safety might depend on her. Little did she know, their journey was about to take a dramatic turn. By late afternoon, Mia and Hank were back on the road, heading toward the museum where the documents were supposed to be delivered. The air between them was tense, charged with an unspoken awareness that something wasn't right. Hank sat stiffly in the passenger seat of Mia's patrol car, his hands gripping the edges of a weathered briefcase containing the classified files. Every few minutes he glanced out the window, scanning the streets as if expecting trouble to appear at any moment. Mia kept her eyes peeled too, her fingers tapping lightly against the steering wheel. She had called ahead to the museum earlier, confirming their arrival time, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Her instinct screamed louder when she noticed a black SUV trailing them from a distance. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, just another vehicle on the road. But something about its behavior set off alarm bells. It stayed far enough behind to avoid suspicion, yet close enough to keep them in sight. Do you see that car? Hank asked suddenly, his voice low and urgent. He pointed toward the rearview mirror, his gaze locked on the SUV. I see it, Mia replied, keeping her tone calm despite the knot forming in her stomach. It's been following us since we left your house. Hank's jaw tightened. I knew it. Someone's onto us. Mia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she focused on driving, her mind racing through possible scenarios. If someone truly wanted those documents, they wouldn't hesitate to act. She needed to stay one step ahead. As they approached a busy intersection, she made a sudden decision. With a quick flick of her wrist, she turned down a side street, taking a sharp detour away from their original route. The SUV followed without hesitation. They're definitely tailing us, Mia muttered under her breath. Hang on, Mr. Grayson, we're going to lose them. She accelerated slightly, weaving through narrow residential streets lined with parked cars and tall trees. The SUV mimicked her every move, staying just far enough back to avoid drawing attention. Sweat prickled at the back of Mia's neck as she realized how vulnerable they were. There were no other vehicles nearby, no witnesses to call for help if things escalated. Where are we going? Hank asked, his voice tinged with both fear and determination. To somewhere safe, Mia said firmly. I'm not letting anyone get their hands on those documents or hurt you. Her next move was risky but necessary. Spotting a small gas station up ahead, she pulled into the parking lot and parked near the entrance, leaving the engine running. Before Hank could protest, she stepped out of the car and walked briskly toward the building. Inside, she found a payphone tucked in the corner and dialed the local police dispatch. Static crackled over the line before a dispatcher answered. "This is Officer Torres," she said quickly. "I need backup ASAP. I'm at Johnson's gas station on Maple Street. We've got a situation involving a potential threat." Before the dispatcher could respond, the line went dead. Mia frowned and tried again, only to hear more static. Something, or someone, was jamming communications. Panic bubbled inside her chest, but she forced herself to stay composed. Returning to the car, she slid back into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel tightly. "We've got a problem," she told Hank. "Our radios are down. Whoever's following us doesn't want us calling for help." Hank nodded grimly. "Then what do we do?" Mia took a deep breath. "We keep moving. But this time, we'll make sure they can't follow us so easily." With that, she sped out of the gas station, heading toward the outskirts of town. The landscape shifted rapidly as they drove further away from the familiar streets of Willow Creek. Fields stretched out endlessly on either side of the highway, dotted with clusters of trees and distant farmhouses. The open space offered fewer places to hide, but it also meant fewer obstacles for whoever was chasing them. The SUV remained hot on their tail, closing the gap little by little. Its headlights grew brighter in the rearview mirror, blinding in the fading daylight. Mia's heart pounded as she pushed the accelerator harder, urging the patrol car to go faster. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan. "There!" Hank shouted suddenly, pointing toward an abandoned warehouse looming in the distance. Its rusted metal walls glinted faintly in the twilight, and weeds had overtaken much of the surrounding area. It looked like the kind of place no one would dare enter after dark. "That'll have to work," Mia said, veering sharply onto a dirt road leading to the warehouse. Dust kicked up behind them as they skidded to a stop, near the entrance. She turned off the engine and grabbed her flashlight, motioning for Hank to stay quiet. Together, they slipped out of the car and ducked behind a stack of old crates piled near the building's crumbling facade. Seconds later, the SUV screeched to a halt outside the warehouse. 3 men emerged, dressed in tactical gear and armed, with weapons that glinted menacingly in the dim light. Their faces were obscured by masks, making them look more like shadowy figures than human beings. One of them carried a device in his hand, a signal jammer, Mia realized, explaining why her radio calls had failed. "Stay here," Mia whispered to Hank, pressing the briefcase firmly into his hands. "Don't move unless I tell you to." "But—" Hank started to protest, but Mia silenced him with a stern look. "I mean it. These guys aren't messing around." Crouching low, Mia crept closer to the SUV, using the cover of darkness to her advantage. She spotted a discarded tire iron lying nearby and snatched it up, gripping it tightly as she formulated a plan. Her training kicked in, overriding her fear. She couldn't let these men intimidate her, not when Hank's life was on the line. The 3 intruders spread out, searching for their targets. Their footsteps echoed eerily in the empty space, punctuated by the occasional metallic clang as they brushed against debris. Mia waited until they were distracted before springing into action. With a burst of adrenaline, she lunged forward, swinging the tire iron with all her strength. It connected squarely with one man's arm, causing him to drop his weapon and stumble backward with a grunt of pain. The other 2 whirled around, startled by the unexpected attack. One raised his gun, aiming directly at Mia, but she dove behind a pile of crates just in time. Bullets ricocheted off the metal, sending sparks flying into the air. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she scrambled to find another vantage point. This was no longer just a routine traffic stop. It was a fight for survival. From his hiding spot, Hank watched the chaos unfold, clutching the briefcase protectively. His military instincts told him to intervene, but he knew better than to put himself in harm's way unnecessarily. Still, he couldn't sit idly by while Mia risked her life to protect him. Summoning every ounce of courage, he scanned the area for anything useful. That's when he spotted it, an old generator perched precariously on a ledge above the warehouse floor. Without hesitation, Hank sprang into action. Using his cane for balance, he hobbled toward the generator, his movements deliberate and steady. The mercenaries were too focused on Mia to notice him slipping past them. Reaching the ledge, he gave the generator a hard shove, sending it tumbling downward. It crashed onto the ground below with a deafening bang, creating a diversion that momentarily stunned everyone, including the attackers. Seizing the opportunity, Mia sprinted toward Hank, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the exit. "Let's go," she yelled, dragging him along as they made their escape. Behind them, the mercenaries regrouped, shouting angrily as they gave chase. Out in the open field, Mia and Hank ran for their lives, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Just as exhaustion threatened to overtake them, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Reinforcements had finally arrived. State troopers responding to Mia's earlier distress call. The cavalry was here, and not a moment too soon. As red and blue lights illuminated the horizon, Mia allowed herself a fleeting moment of relief. They weren't safe yet, but at least they weren't alone anymore. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, slicing through the tension-filled air like a lifeline. Mia and Hank stumbled to a halt, their chests heaving as they turned to see flashing lights piercing the darkness behind them. Relief washed over Mia's face, but it was short-lived. The mercenaries pursuing them were still dangerously close, their silhouettes visible against the dim glow of the warehouse. They weren't about to give up, not when they were so close to getting what they wanted. Mia quickly pulled Hank behind an abandoned tractor at the edge of the field, shielding them from view. She glanced down at the briefcase clutched tightly in his hands. Whatever secrets those documents held, they were worth killing for, or dying for, and she wasn't about to let either of them become casualties in this high-stakes game. "We're almost there," Mia whispered breathlessly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Just stay low and keep moving toward the road." Hank nodded, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. For a man who had lived through wars and seen unimaginable horrors, this moment felt surreal, like a chapter from his past had come back to haunt him. Yet here he was relying on a rookie cop half his age to save his life. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride in Mia's bravery. She reminded him of the young soldiers he once commanded, fearless, resourceful, and unyielding in the face of danger. As the first state trooper vehicle screeched to a halt near the warehouse, the mercenaries hesitated. Their leader barked orders, gesturing wildly as they regrouped under the cover of shadows. But they were outnumbered now, and the element of surprise was gone. The troopers poured out of their cars, weapons drawn, shouting commands to surrender. "Drop your weapons, hands where we can see them." One officer yelled into the night, his voice amplified by a megaphone. For a moment it seemed like the mercenaries might comply. Then, without warning, gunfire erupted. Bullets zipped through the air, ricocheting off metal and kicking up dirt around the troopers. Chaos descended upon the scene as both sides exchanged fire. Sparks flew, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Mia crouched lower, shielding Hank with her body. Her training kicked in again, reminding her that staying put wasn't an option. They needed to reach safety before things escalated further. Peering over the edge of the tractor, she spotted a narrow path leading toward the road, partially obscured by tall grass. It was risky, but it was their only chance. "On my count, we move," Mia instructed, her voice barely audible over the din of gunfire. "Stay close to me no matter what." Hank gripped the briefcase tighter, nodding resolutely. Despite his age, there was steel in his gaze, a quiet strength that told Mia he wouldn't falter, not now. Together they prepared to make their break. 1, 2, 3, Mia hissed, springing to her feet and darting forward with Hank right behind her. They zigzagged across the uneven terrain, using every bit of cover they could find. The sound of bullets whizzing past spurred them onward, each step fueled by sheer willpower. Behind them, the skirmish intensified, but Mia didn't look back. Her focus was singular, getting Hank and those documents to safety. They reached the road just as another wave of reinforcements arrived. This time it wasn't just local law enforcement. A convoy of military vehicles roared onto the scene, headlights blazing and engines roaring. Soldiers spilled out, clad in full tactical gear, their movements precise and coordinated. To Mia and Hank, it felt like an entire army had descended upon the field. "What's going on?" Hank muttered, his voice tinged with awe. "Why are the feds involved?" Before Mia could answer, a commanding officer approached them, his uniform crisp and his demeanor authoritative. He introduced himself as Colonel Reynolds, explaining that the classified documents Hank carried had triggered a national security alert. Though decades old, the information contained within them was still considered sensitive enough to warrant protection. Someone had flagged their disappearance, prompting a swift response from the Department of Defense. "You've done well, Officer Torres," Colonel Reynolds said, his tone respectful but firm. "But this situation is beyond local jurisdiction. We'll take it from here." Mia hesitated, torn between relief and disbelief. She had started the day pulling over a man with a broken taillight, and now she was standing in the middle of a military operation. It was surreal, overwhelming even, but she knew better than to argue. Instead, she handed over the briefcase containing the documents, ensuring it remained secure until it could be properly processed. Meanwhile, the mercenaries were quickly overwhelmed by the combined forces of state troopers and military personnel. Outnumbered and outgunned, they surrendered one by one, dropping their weapons and raising their hands in defeat. Within minutes, the area was secured, and the immediate threat neutralized. Helicopters circled overhead, casting stark beams of light across the battlefield below. Colonel Reynolds turned his attention to Hank, offering a crisp salute. "Mr. Grayson, thank you for safeguarding these documents all these years. Your service to this country has not been forgotten." Hank blinked, momentarily taken aback by the gesture. After everything he'd been through, the war, the loss of his wife, the constant reminders of his past, it meant something to hear those words. He straightened his posture, returning the salute with a shaky but proud hand. "Just doing my duty, sir," he replied softly. As the dust settled and the adrenaline began to fade, Mia found herself reflecting on how drastically her day had changed. What had begun as a routine traffic stop had spiraled into a life-or-death scenario involving mercenaries, military intervention, and decades-old secrets. And yet, amid the chaos, she had discovered something unexpected: her own resilience. She had faced danger head-on, protected someone vulnerable, and earned the respect of seasoned officers and veterans alike. For Hank, the experience brought closure. He realized that the sacrifices he'd made during his service hadn't been in vain, that even after retirement his actions continued to matter. The weight of carrying those documents for so many years lifted slightly, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. As he stood beside Mia, watching the military team load the briefcase into a secure vehicle, he felt a quiet pride swelling in his chest. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the field was eerily silent. The mercenaries were in custody, the documents safely recovered, and the threat neutralized. Officers milled about, collecting evidence and securing the perimeter, while medical teams tended to anyone injured in the skirmish. Mia and Hank lingered for a while longer, soaking in the aftermath of the night's events. Finally, Colonel Reynolds approached them one last time. "Officer Torres, Mr. Grayson, I want to personally thank you both for your courage tonight. You've done your country proud." Mia smiled faintly, exhaustion etched into her features. "Just doing my job, sir." "And mine," Hank added with a small chuckle. As they parted ways, Hank climbing into a military escort vehicle and Mia heading back to her patrol car, neither could shake the feeling that their lives had been forever changed. For Mia, it was a reminder of why she became a police officer, to protect and serve no matter the cost. For Hank, it was a testament to the enduring legacy of his service, a legacy that spanned generations and bridged the gap between the past and the present. Though the drama of the night had ended, its impact would linger long after the headlines faded. In that quiet town of Willow Creek, two unlikely heroes had emerged, proving that courage comes in all forms, and sometimes it takes just one act of bravery to change the course of history. The sun had fully risen now, casting a golden glow over the once chaotic field. The remnants of the night's events lay scattered around. Spent bullet casings glinted in the morning light. Abandoned gear from the mercenaries sat untouched, and tire tracks crisscrossed the dirt like scars on the earth. Despite the calm that now settled over the area, the weight of what had transpired hung heavily in the air. For Mia and Hank, the adrenaline rush was beginning to wear off, leaving behind a mix of exhaustion, disbelief, and quiet reflection. Mia leaned against her patrol car, sipping lukewarm coffee someone had handed her during the cleanup operation. Her uniform was smudged with dirt, her boots caked with mud, but she barely noticed. She replayed the events of the past 12 hours in her mind, trying to make sense of how everything had unfolded. A broken taillight, a stack of old documents, a group of armed mercenaries, and now an entire military convoy standing guard over a piece of history. It sounded like the plot of an action movie, not something that happened in sleepy Willow Creek. Hank, meanwhile, sat in the back seat of a military transport vehicle, staring out the window at the scene before him. His hands rested loosely on his knees, the absence of the briefcase feeling strange after carrying it for so long. He thought about the sacrifices he'd made during his time in service, the friends he'd lost, the battles he'd fought, and wondered if any of it had truly prepared him for this moment. Here he was, decades later, still fighting to protect something important. Life had a funny way of circling back to where it started. Colonel Reynolds approached Mia, breaking her reverie. His face was stern but kind, the lines etched into his skin speaking of years spent leading men into battle. "Officer Torres," he said, his voice measured, "you handled yourself exceptionally well last night. Not many rookies would have kept their cool under those circumstances." Mia shrugged modestly. "I just did what I thought was right, sir. Protecting people is my job." Reynolds nodded approvingly. "That kind of mindset is rare these days. You should be proud of yourself." He paused, glancing toward the transport vehicle where Hank sat silently. "And Mr. Grayson, his actions speak volumes about the kind of man he is. Few individuals would carry such responsibility for so long without complaint or recognition." Mia followed his gaze, watching as Hank absently rubbed the edge of his cane. "He's been through a lot, hasn't he?" she asked softly. "More than most," Reynolds replied. "But men like him are the backbone of our country. They don't ask for medals or parades. They simply do what needs to be done." As they spoke, one of the soldiers approached, saluting sharply before addressing the colonel. "Sir, we've secured all the suspects. Preliminary interrogations suggest they were hired by private collectors seeking historical artifacts. They believed the documents contained valuable intelligence." Reynolds frowned. "Private collectors, who authorized this?" "That's still unclear, sir," the soldier admitted. "But we're tracing their communications now. It seems they acted independently, outside official channels." Mia listened intently, piecing together the puzzle. These weren't rogue agents working for a foreign power. They were opportunists looking to profit from history. The realization made her blood boil. To them, Hank's legacy and the sacrifices of countless others was nothing more than a commodity to be bought and sold. "They won't get away with it," Mia muttered under her breath, her fists clenching involuntarily. "No, they won't," Reynolds agreed firmly. "Thanks to you and Mr. Grayson, justice will be served." With that, the colonel excused himself, leaving Mia alone with her thoughts. She walked over to the transport vehicle and knocked lightly on the doorframe. Hank looked up, offering a weak smile. "Morning, Officer Torres," he said, his voice tinged with fatigue. "How are you holding up, Mr. Grayson?" she asked, leaning against the open door. "Well enough, considering," he replied. "Though I'm not sure I'll ever forget last night." "Me neither," Mia admitted with a small laugh. "It's not every day you find yourself dodging bullets and outrunning mercenaries." Hank chuckled dryly. "You handled yourself like a pro. Reminds me of some of the young officers I used to train." Mia blushed slightly at the compliment. "I couldn't have done it without your help, though. Those guys wouldn't have stood a chance against both of us." Hank's expression softened, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Still, it's nice to know there are people like you out there willing to step up when it matters. Makes me hopeful for the future." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another officer, who informed Mia that her statement would be needed soon. She nodded and turned back to Hank. "Listen, I need to take care of a few things, but I'll check on you later. Okay? Make sure you're doing all right. Take your time, Hank said warmly. I'll be fine. As Mia walked away, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about solving a case or protecting evidence. It was about honoring the sacrifices of those who came before her. Men like Hank deserved better than to live in fear, haunted by relics of their past. They deserved peace, respect, and recognition for the lives they'd dedicated to serving others. Back at the makeshift command center, Mia recounted the events of the previous night to investigators, detailing every twist and turn of their harrowing journey. Her account was thorough yet humble, focusing less on her own heroics and more on the importance of safeguarding Hank's legacy. By the time she finished, several officers had gathered around, listening intently. Word of her bravery had spread, quickly, earning her nods of approval and murmurs of admiration. Later that afternoon, as the military team prepared to escort Hank to a secure facility for debriefing, Colonel Reynolds called Mia aside once more. "Officer Torres, I wanted to personally commend you again. Your quick thinking and unwavering dedication saved not only Mr. Grayson, but also a significant piece of our nation's history." "Thank you, sir," Mia replied sincerely. "But I couldn't have done it alone. Mr. Grayson trusted me, and that made all the difference." Reynolds smiled faintly. "Trust is earned, Officer Torres, and you've earned it. From him, from us, and from everyone here today." Before parting ways, Hank stepped out of the transport vehicle one final time. He extended his hand to Mia, his grip firm and steady. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, Officer Torres. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Mia shook his hand, her throat tightening with emotion. "And you've inspired me in ways I can't even put into words, Mr. Grayson. Thank you for trusting me, for sharing your story, and for reminding me why I chose this path." With that, Hank climbed back into the vehicle, giving her one last nod before the doors closed. As the convoy pulled away, Mia watched until the dust settled and the road returned to silence. Though their paths might never cross again, she knew she'd carry the lessons of this experience with her forever. For Mia, it was a defining moment. A reminder that courage isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's found in the quiet. Decisions to do what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. And for Hank, it was a chance to see that his service hadn't been forgotten, that the torch had been passed to a new generation ready to carry the flame. As Mia returned to her patrol car, the town of Willow Creek greeted her with its usual tranquility. The streets were empty, the skies clear, and life moved forward as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Mia knew better. Beneath the surface, heroes walked among them, ordinary people capable of extraordinary acts. And sometimes, all it took was a single moment of bravery to change everything. The days that followed the dramatic events at the abandoned warehouse felt like a blur to Mia. Life in Willow Creek slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but for her, nothing was quite the same. The quiet streets she patrolled now carried echoes of the night when bullets flew and military convoys rolled in. Every stop sign, every flickering street lamp seemed to whisper reminders of how quickly routine could spiral into chaos, and how courage could rise to meet it. Maya spent hours filling out reports, answering questions from higher-ups, and recounting the story to curious colleagues who couldn't believe what they'd heard. Word spread fast through the department, and soon everyone knew about the rookie cop who had stood toe-to-toe with mercenaries while protecting a decorated veteran. Her sergeant, usually stern and reserved, gave her an approving nod one morning as she walked into the station. "Good work out there, Torres," he said simply, his tone carrying more praise than she'd ever expected from him. It wasn't just recognition, it was respect, earned the hard way. But despite the accolades, Mia found herself thinking less about her own role and more about Hank. She wondered how he was doing, whether the debriefings had been exhausting or cathartic, and if he finally felt some peace after decades of carrying those documents. She hoped the museum would honor his contribution properly, ensuring that future generations understood the sacrifices made by people like him. A week later, Mia received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten the ink slightly smudged but legible. The return address confirmed it was from Hank. Eagerly tearing open the envelope, she unfolded the paper and began to read. Dear Officer Torres, I hope this note finds you well. I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. Not just for saving my life, but for reminding me why I chose to serve all those years ago. You reminded me that duty doesn't end when we hang up our uniforms. It lives on in the choices we make every day. The documents are safely in the hands of the museum now, where they belong. They'll be displayed alongside other artifacts telling the stories of those who came before us. I'm told there will even be a plaque bearing my name, a small tribute to the part I played. Funny thing is, I never sought recognition, but knowing that my service might inspire someone else, well, that means more than I can say. I also wanted to let you know that I've decided to stay involved with the museum. Sharing my experiences feels right somehow. Maybe it's time I stopped keeping them locked away inside me. Who knows? Perhaps I'll see you at an event someday, though I doubt you'll recognize me without the cane. Take care of yourself, Officer Torres. Keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more people like you. Sincerely, Hank Grayson. Mia read the letter twice, her heart swelling with gratitude and admiration. For a man who had carried so much weight on his shoulders, Hank's words radiated warmth and optimism. He hadn't just survived the ordeal, he had grown from it, finding new purpose in sharing his story. His resilience inspired her deeply, reinforcing her belief that every act of kindness and bravery mattered, no matter how small it seemed. As the weeks turned into months, the incident became the stuff of local legend. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing it "The Night the Military Came to Willow Creek." Interviews aired on television, articles appeared in newspapers, and social media buzzed with speculation about the mysterious documents and the unlikely duo at the center of it all. While Mia appreciated the attention brought to Hank's story, she preferred staying out of the spotlight. To her, the real heroes were the veterans who had given so much for their country, often without asking for anything in return. Still, the experience changed her profoundly. Where once she doubted her abilities as a rookie, she now faced challenges with confidence and determination. Each call, each traffic stop, each interaction with the community reminded her that she was making a difference, even if it didn't always feel like it. And whenever self-doubt crept in, she thought back to Hank's letter and the trust he placed in her during their darkest hour. One crisp autumn afternoon, several months after the incident, Mia received an invitation in the Icon mail. It was an official-looking envelope adorned with the logo of the National Veterans Museum. Inside was a card inviting her to attend a special exhibit, unveiling ceremony honoring Harold Hank Grayson and others like him. The date was set for Veterans Day, a fitting tribute to those who served. On the day of the event, Mia arrived early, dressed in her uniform and clutching a bouquet of flowers she'd picked up on the way. The museum was bustling with activity, filled with families, veterans, and dignitaries eager to pay their respects. Posters lined the walls, showcasing photographs and stories of soldiers from different eras. At the center of it all stood a glass case containing the very documents Hank had risked his life to protect. Beside it was a plaque bearing his name and rank, along with a heartfelt message about his dedication to duty. When Mia spotted Hank across the room, she almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the frail man leaning heavily on his cane. Instead, he stood tall and proud, wearing a crisp suit and a Marine Corps cap. His eyes sparkled with pride as he greeted visitors and shared anecdotes about his time in service. When he saw Mia approaching, his face lit up with a wide smile. "Officer Torres," he exclaimed, extending his hand. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Mia replied, shaking his hand warmly. "Congratulations, Mr. Grayson. This is incredible." Hank chuckled modestly. "It's not about me, it's about everyone who served. I'm just glad I lived long enough to see this day." Together they wandered through the exhibits, pausing occasionally to admire displays dedicated to fallen comrades and unsung heroes. As they stood before Hank's display, Mia felt a lump form in her throat. Seeing his name immortalized alongside, such greatness moved her deeply. She realized then that history wasn't just something written in textbooks, It was alive, carried forward by the actions of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Before leaving, Mia handed Hank the bouquet of flowers. "For you," she said softly, "to thank you for trusting me, for inspiring me, and for showing me what true courage looks like." Hank accepted the gift, visibly touched. "You've already thanked me plenty, Officer Torres. But if you really want to repay me, keep being the person you are. That's all any of us can ask for." With that, they parted ways, promising to stay in touch. As Mia drove home that evening, she reflected on how far she'd come since that fateful traffic stop. What had started as a simple act of duty had blossomed into something greater. A reminder that heroism isn't defined by grand gestures, but by the willingness to step up when it matters most. In the months and years that followed, Mia continued to serve her community with the same passion and integrity. She became known not just as a skilled officer, but as a compassionate listener, always ready to lend a helping hand. Meanwhile, Hank embraced his role as a storyteller, traveling to schools and events to share his experiences with younger generations. Together they proved that courage comes in all forms, and that even the smallest acts of bravery can leave lasting ripples. And so, in the quiet town of Willow Creek, two unlikely heroes remained forever connected by a shared moment of triumph. Their story served as a testament to the power of trust, resilience, and the enduring legacy of those who dedicate their lives to serving others. Though the headlines faded and the world moved on, their bond endured, a beacon of hope in an uncertain world.